Somewhere over a runway in the Pacific Northwest, a jet that no camera has ever fully captured is already taxiing toward its first flight. The U.S. Air Force calls it the F-47, and officials who have been briefed on it say nothing built before comes close. It is faster than an F-22, it can fly farther than an F-35, and according to the people who designed it, it is supposed to make every other sixth-generation fighter on the planet look outdated the moment it enters service. Today we are breaking down exactly what the F-47 is, how it came to exist, and why the U.S. Air Force is convinced this single aircraft will define air superiority for the next 40 years. Like, subscribe and share. Let's begin. The story of the F-47 does not start in 2025. It starts back in 2014 when the U.S. Air Force quietly launched a program called Next Generation Air Dominance, or NGAD. The idea was simple on paper but enormous in practice. Design a successor to the F-22 Raptor that could survive and win in airspace defended by the most advanced radar and missile systems Russia and China could field by the 2030s. By 2015, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, had already begun funding full-scale experimental aircraft, known as X-planes, under a classified effort worth roughly $1 billion. Two companies built and flew demonstrators. Boeing's aircraft took to the sky first in 2019. Lockheed Martin followed with its own demonstrator in 2022. Both prototypes reportedly flew several hundred hours each, testing radical concepts in stealth shaping, propulsion, and digital design long before the public had any idea a sixth-generation fighter program even existed. The public got its first hint in September 2020. When a U.S. Air Force acquisition official told reporters that a full-scale NGAD flight demonstrator had broken records. He gave almost no details, but the comment alone signaled that the program was far more advanced than anyone outside the Pentagon had realized. Then in 2024, the entire effort nearly collapsed. The Secretary of the Air Force at the time, Frank Kendall, paused NGAD entirely, telling reporters that the service simply did not have enough money to build a sixth-generation fighter on top of every other modernization priority it was juggling. The projected cost per aircraft had ballooned to roughly 3 times the price of an F-35. Kendall ordered a cost reduction study, and for months nobody knew whether NGAD would survive in any form. The options on the table reportedly included a smaller airframe, a single engine instead of 2, reduced range, and shifting more of the mission onto unmanned drones. The conclusion of that study was clear. NGAD was still necessary, but it had to be redesigned around affordability. That redesign shaped the final competition, and the outcome surprised almost everyone who follows military aviation. On March 21, 2025, President Donald Trump personally announced that Boeing had won the contract to build the Air Force's next-generation fighter, now designated the F-47. This was stunning for one simple reason. Lockheed Martin had built every Western stealth fighter currently in production, the F-22 and the F-35, while Boeing had not designed a brand new fighter jet since the F/A-18EF Super Hornet entered service back in 1999. According to Air and Space Forces magazine, the Air Force selected Boeing based on what officials called best overall value. Several factors reportedly tipped the decision. Boeing had built an extraordinarily detailed digital twin of the F-47, allowing engineers to test radar signature, maintainability, and manufacturing processes entirely inside software before a single physical prototype existed. Awarding the contract to Boeing also diversified the industrial base for fighter production, reducing the Pentagon's reliance on a single stealth fighter manufacturer. The contract itself, covering engineering and manufacturing development, is worth at least $20 billion, with potential lifetime production orders valued in the hundreds of billions once the jet enters full-rate manufacturing. Steve Parker, interim president and chief executive officer of Boeing Defense, Space and Security, said at the time that the company had made the most significant investment in the history of its defense business to prepare for this exact mission. So what does the F-47 actually bring to the fight? The Air Force has disclosed only a handful of specific performance numbers, but they are staggering. Air Force leadership has said the F-47 will have a combat radius exceeding 1,000 nautical miles, more than 1,852 kilometers without refueling. For comparison, that is roughly double the unrefueled combat radius of the F-22 Raptor. President Trump, after being briefed personally on the aircraft's capabilities, stated publicly that the F-47 would have a maximum speed in excess of Mach 2, putting it firmly in the same speed class as the F-22 while reportedly carrying far more advanced low observable technology. Trump described the jet as equipped with cutting-edge stealth technology that makes it, in his words, virtually unseeable, and said it would have the most power of any jet of its kind ever made. Maneuverability appears to be just as important as speed in this design. Even though the F-47 is built primarily around beyond visual range combat, where pilots engage enemy aircraft long before they are ever visually spotted, officials have suggested the airframe retains a high degree of close-in agility, in case it ever needs to fight at short range. One of the most important design choices is something the Air Force calls the loyal wingman concept. The F-47 will not fly alone. It is being built from the ground up to operate alongside collaborative combat aircraft, unmanned drones that handle reconnaissance, electronic warfare, and even strike missions while taking direction from the single human pilot inside the F-47. Air Force Chief of Staff General David Alvin has described the F-47 as the quarterback of a much larger system, a manned aircraft that functions as a command and control node for a whole family of autonomous platforms flying around it. Now here's a number that puts everything in perspective. The Air Force has announced its intention to acquire more than 185 F-47s, a fleet built specifically to replace the aging F-22 Raptor force. Some unofficial estimates put the eventual total closer to 220 or 250 aircraft. Officials have said the first flight is targeted for 2028, with the jet expected to become operational by 2029 and enter full service sometime in the 2030s. Alvin gave a brief but telling update in September 2025, saying that in the few months since the contract award, Boeing was already beginning to manufacture the first article, adding, quote, "We have to go fast, like subscribe and share." That urgency is not coming from nowhere. One propulsion question still has not been answered. The engine that will ultimately power the F-47 has not been chosen yet, because the companion program responsible for it, the Next Generation Adaptive Propulsion Effort, is still ongoing. Two designs are competing: General Electric Aerospace's XA-102 and Pratt & Whitney's XA-103. Both use a three-stream adaptive cycle architecture, meaning the engine can shift between a fuel-efficient cruise mode and a high-thrust combat mode depending on what the mission demands, while also managing the extreme heat generated by onboard sensors and directed energy systems. For reference, the F-35's current engine produces 43,000 pounds of thrust and is considered the most powerful fighter engine flying today. Whichever adaptive engine wins the competition for the F-47 is expected to exceed that figure substantially. That digital twin approach deserves a closer look, because it is arguably the real revolution behind this program, even more than the airframe itself. Traditional fighter development required building physical prototypes, flying them, finding flaws, and then redesigning expensive hardware, a cycle that could eat up a decade before a single production jet rolled off the line. Boeing's engineers instead modeled the F-47 down to its radar cross-section and its maintenance procedures entirely in software, running thousands of virtual tests before metal was ever cut. That is part of why Boeing could move from contract award to manufacturing the first article in just a few months, something almost unheard of in modern fighter procurement. There is also a story hidden inside the aircraft's name. Air Force officials said the number 47 was chosen to honor the P-47 Thunderbolt, one of the most heavily produced American fighters of World War II, a rugged aircraft that excelled at both air combat and ground attack across every theater of that war. It is also, not coincidentally, a nod to the 47th President of the United States, who personally announced the contract award. Money has not made this easy. The fiscal year 2025 National Defense Authorization Act actually cut $30.9 million from the NGAD budget, and the Senate Appropriations Committee at one point recommended redirecting $557.1 million away from the F-47 program and toward the collaborative combat aircraft drones instead. But the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, passed in July 2025, reversed that pressure by injecting $400 million specifically to accelerate F-47 production. The Air Force's argument is straightforward. If every F-47 operates alongside two relatively affordable drone wingmen, the cost per combat-relevant aircraft on the battlefield actually drops, even though the F-47 itself is expensive. One F-47 paired with two collaborative combat aircraft could deliver more total capability than 2 or 3 F-35s for a comparable price tag. Whether that math holds up in practice will determine just how far this program goes. This isn't happening in a vacuum either. China has been flying its own next-generation prototype, the J-36, openly in public skies, practically inviting the world to study it. The J-36 appears tailless, reportedly uses 3 engines, and is widely seen as Beijing's answer to NGAD. The F-47, by contrast, remains almost entirely classified. The Air Force has released exactly one artist's rendering since the March 2025 announcement, and no photograph of the real aircraft, demonstrator or otherwise, has ever been made public. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Japan are jointly developing their own 6th-generation fighter under the Global Combat Air Program, also known as Tempest, and unlike both the F-47 and the J-36, early renderings show that design keeping large vertical tails, a major philosophical difference in how nations are approaching stealth and control. The secrecy surrounding the F-47 is not an accident either. Every detail the Air Force withholds is one less data point a rival Air Force can use to design a missile, a radar, or a tactic specifically meant to counter it. China's decision to fly the J-36 openly may win headlines, but it also hands foreign analysts months or years of head start in studying its shape, its engine layout, and its likely weaknesses. The United States appears to be betting that operating in the dark for as long as possible, right up until the F-47 is ready to fly combat missions, is worth more than any short-term public relations win. Perhaps the most forward-looking part of the entire program is something officials call the Digital Century Series concept. Instead of designing a single airframe meant to last 40 or 50 years with occasional upgrades, the F-47 is built using open architecture software and digital engineering from day one, allowing the Air Force to upgrade its capabilities continuously without needing a complete redesign every time a new threat emerges. That single design philosophy may end up being more important than any individual performance number, because it means the F-47 you see in 2030 may already be functionally different from the F-47 flying in 2035, all without a new airframe ever rolling off the line. What is certain right now is this: the United States has committed $20 billion and its most experienced fighter pilots' confidence to a jet that almost nobody outside the program has seen. Built by a company that has not produced a new fighter in over 2 decades, racing against a Chinese prototype that is already flown in broad daylight. Whether the F-47 lives up to every claim made about it will not be known for years. But based on everything the Air Force, Boeing, and the White House have said publicly, this aircraft is being built with one explicit goal: to make sure that whatever China, Russia, or anyone else puts in the sky next, the United States gets there first and stays there longer. Like, subscribe, and share. Until next time.